Hi, everybody. I'm Sean McCracken, news editor here for CoStar News Hotels, joining STR's Jesper Palmqvist in Singapore. Jesper, how are you this month?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
So, as always, we join you for our monthly tour around the Asia Pacific region. A lot to cover this month, including you're just getting back from one of the high-profile hotel investment events of the region. So, what are your big takeaways from HICAP this year?
Thanks. Yeah, it was good to see everyone. As always, it is conference season, right? So we're closing to some degree. There's still some more events in Japan. More on that later. But HICAP was good. I had a good attendance. I think a lot of right people. It was a good event. So I think BHN did a good job there. I think, in short, it's one of those mixed years that we have seen at other conferences where investors are there, they're ready, they're interested, they're looking a little bit new what they would compared to what they used to be looking. So investment interest absolutely there, and that continues both from acquisitions of portfolios and single assets, but on the performance side, the margins are tighter and depending on where you're investing. So this spread is interesting. I think for a neutral, it makes the conference more interesting because it's less about everything is awesome or everything is gloomy.
Yeah.
There are countless stories around. But I suppose personally, the big highlight of the show was because we were there in full force and we had our president Amanda there as well. But was the fact that Karan Mahesh, who's our senior sales for South and Southeast Asia, won the ISHC Rising Star Award. So we celebrated that. So yeah, shout out to Karan, who's doing a phenomenal job as an award winner.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Great for him. Makes you jealous to when you were young enough to be called a rising star, right?
I know, and it's important that he's not 34 and a half because you need to be 35 and below. But it's good. It's great to see people like him really moving quickly here.
So we always joke stateside that at the big investment shows, they always describe the tone or the hotel leaders there always describe the tone as cautiously optimistic, which is the way to like cover their bases. Was there a lot of cautious optimism around?
I think there was maybe less so. I feel like that line would run a lot in the US right now. Mm-hmm. But I think depending on what session you're in, what topic is discussed, because in some areas it's totally the wrong line, right? Because if you look at Japan and the growth or whatever it is, so in China, maybe so, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you can't put Asia Pacific in one big hat there, so it's kind of hard to say. I wouldn't. So it wasn't it's maybe easier in North America, but it's hard to run that line here, to be honest.
So with that point in mind, we were just discussing something you kind of dove into a little bit while you were there about the variance between the markets. So, and a little bit of, who is investing where and the why behind that. So let's dive into that. What markets are attractive to what investors these days?
Yeah, it was a good. I did a lot of research and looking and talking to people where do people invest right now and why? And I suppose if you try to put them in a few buckets, what is always interesting and always at the top, which we have covered kind of a different way before on this podcast, has been like Singapore, Japan, and Maldives. The similarities being you have a high barrier to entry, fine in terms of costs, in Maldives for that, but also in Singapore and Japan, like just getting in and because the land, etc. But the fact that this has such a stable and high yield, and they are very good in high end, right? It's upper upscale and luxury. Mm-hmm. So luxury returns are so strong. So that makes perfect sense. It was interesting to see how, private equity. In the one difference would be in Japan, there's this incredible value add potential, right? Where you can flip something for efficiencies and maybe 7-10 years and flip something and make a good coin. But this is also true in Singapore. It's just a bit different time frame. like Peng Sum. So Cho Peng Sum, the CEO of Pan Pacific, made a great point in one of the panels at HICAP on Singapore when he said one of his assets that they just sold, right? It was on their books for 100 million and sold now for over 500. So that's a nice pocket of 400 million. What other industry can you do that over that time frame? And it's a good example on why people get in on that thing and why so many family offices have opened. That long-term income and stability is what so many like, which means with all these new hotels in Singapore, where people, it's more about the boutique, so mixed use and branded residences that are interesting. And I was going through also some of the challenges, and they're obviously similar in those, but we're starting to see a bit of a shift as well. The highlight for me on Japan that investors need to look at is that operational cost that is so different, because even with new leadership that have come, the first female prime minister, which is, a good signal and all that, even though I don't know how much that changes the narrative in total, but you've had food prices go up 7%, the highest increase in 40 years. You have, new reality where all these costs needs to be flushed out to the hotel guests ultimately.
Yeah.
So if that big revenue increase didn't happen, you'd have not a crisis, but a much different scenario. Mm-hmm. So I think what's interesting for Japan is that, okay, you have either a great asset, say core asset in one of the three big markets, CBD, or even this onsen plays and regional plays. The cost reality is going to be very different the next 10, 15 years, and factoring that in. And I think wealth funds and PE are good at that, and understanding that from those three. But I mean, I think you can guess on the flip side, other markets where it's less costly to get in. The competition between Vietnam and Thailand is a hot topic. People are saying like, well, is Thailand becoming a little bit too complacent in its tourism strategy and construction? I mean, Thailand is still a great place, right? For the big tourism engine, people want to grow their brand on a wider platform across the country. A lot of talk now second tier cities growing that, but Vietnam is so different because the growth numbers now is very different, right? But particularly on the coastline around on regional resorts. And even if there's a lot of resorts planned, again, value add for something to get out quite quickly is a huge opportunity. And you will have issues like, can the supply chain hold up with that? I think it can over time. It's just that it'll be a little bit knee-jerk reactions off and on that you have to see, and which we saw in Thailand in performance this year, right?
So you know what I'm curious about before we move completely off the topic of who's investing where. One of the things I always found interesting about international investment into the U.S. is there's always this phenomenon, especially if there's kind of a pool of investors that are moving into the country for the first time. There's always this gravity towards everybody wanted to own a hotel in New York, just to say, like, we own a trophy asset in New York City, right? And even if the financials, the numbers backing up that deal weren't as good as something they could have got somewhere else, it was just this, like, cultural cachet of saying, like, we own a piece of real estate in this major international market. Is there an Asia Pacific equivalent to that? Is there a city that kind of outside money flows into just because investors want to say we own a piece of this place? Is it Tokyo? Is it somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easy to say Tokyo now because it's one of the hotter markets with all the travel. I suppose you could answer that two ways. With the size and diversity of Asia Pacific as a whole, the key thing, and some brands have succeeded and some, despite decades, have not succeeded, is to have something in X amount of cities, like to have something and not in the suburbs, right? So to have a property in 5 to 10 key cities, and less about the airports, maybe like Europe, right? And other things. So I had to have, and as that, but if you need something in very few cities, yes, Tokyo, Singapore, and remember, Hong Kong was, listen, Hong Kong is still a great market, but Hong Kong was more up there than in the past. but it still resonates. Depends on where you're coming from. But to have Singapore and Tokyo, if you really strip it down, and I think that's where it gets interesting, right? Because do you need something in Bangkok for that return on ego and a trophy? I mean, if you're from Southeast Asia, Thailand, sure, but from a global investment, no. And I think that's maybe that's a long term interesting point. Like at what point in time is it Mumbai? At what point in
Yeah.
time is it? But listen, if you're a luxury brand, if you're a Aman or Rosewood or something like that, with your brand to be aligned with those values, that is, you need one in Maldives, you need something in Kyoto, right? So, and insert Caribbean market X or French Polynesia. So I think it definitely depends on what class you're operating in as well, right?
And I'm sure it depends on what the gateways are to your specific traveler too. It's like why all the Latin American brands always had to have a hotel in Miami. Like that's the entrance point.
Yeah, and I suppose in this region, the equivalent there would have been someone like Bangkok or like Thailand as a whole, because Thailand attracts, so many arrivals every year from different, from everything from backpacker to the high-end traveler or business traveler. Their exposure to brand X matters for sure, because they will see everything and how that runs. But then you get into a question: which country in Asia Pacific is more likely to deliver a consistent brand experience?
Well,
that's something for an upcoming chat, because I think that varies by country, like because it's all about the owner, and if the owner is ready to invest in that brand, then yes. So I think that. Yeah.
Changing tracks a little bit here. Obviously, beginning of this month, we had Golden Week in China, which is obviously a big deal, if only to kind of take the temperature on travel. But you were mentioning that there's been some positive movement in that country. So how are we feeling about China right now?
Well, yeah, it's interesting when everyone in China, I think Golden Week did not have a massive impact because it came at a time before we're starting to see a major turnaround. So it wasn't like it shifted. Sometimes some of these times you look at if it's National Day or the Lunar New Year, it matters more. Did it help to drive something a little bit around? Yes. At the same time, you got because the people are traveling domestically for sure, and they're still going to Korea, Japan, etc., and Vietnam for sure. I think the interesting thing is some of these leisure markets in Q3 and leading into in the last few weeks did pick a little bit up during those weekdays, and I think that's what helped us see for the first time in 18 months, I'd like to say, there was positive occupancy in ADR in mainland China for the first time for that month in a long time. And we might see a little bit off and on, but I don't expect right now, barring any strange things coming out of the either ASEAN meeting or the Korea meeting or with the high-end politicians. But if nothing else changes there, I think we're starting to see the slow shift around on the midweek traveler, because remember what was missing it was corporate and meetings, and that is the state-owned enterprises. And it was just like in the US where there was less government spend in Indonesia, like we talked about before. And you have to remember that when they are told, and I mean they're really ordered, you can't have meetings anymore, right? And there's so much of that in China as well, and some of it switched online, some of it didn't happen. And I think the best example is how high-end hotels would say they would have to give up a meeting room just to keep the room's business. So clearly that impacts. And maybe the best example, our colleague here, Christine, based up in Beijing, said the other day, luxury hotels that start pop-up things that we've seen in Bangkok before, but more common now in China, just in the street to try and sell their food, because F&B is suffering so much, right? So you set something up like, hey, go out and sell some buns here and do this and sell some food from our amazing restaurant to passersby, because people aren't coming in. So you're literally taking high-end restaurant from F&B from hotels into the street to sell it. That is a sign of F&B struggling this year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, they're pivoting as well, because if you think about it, no more big weddings, no SOE. So a lot more small meetings. And we talk about foreign arrivals growing into China. Even if the number is slow, they're not just going to a couple of main streets. They're traveling a little bit more. Historically, these state-owned enterprises will come back again. Those meetings will come back to some degree. And if driven a little bit by leisure or Golden Week, and the next quarter or so starts seeing a turn again because they need that for the engine to run, I think then you'll start to see those weekdays, the percentages. And I have to remember that high-end hotels and on weekend, we still have, decent rates and occupancy levels. So that's kind of where the crunch is.
So, as we mentioned, Japan was the other major market with some big news this month with new leadership in that country. You seem to think that that's not going to kind of change the overall trajectory, at least in the near term, right?
No, I don't think so. And if you look at not just in their leadership, and I suppose a common theme, and not just in the region, but globally, leadership seems to be a fickle thing these days. They change more. We used to have political leaders that stayed a lot longer, but Japan has been in a transitional phase, and you can understand why. It's gone through a lot of change in the last decade for sure. It's obviously a great signal and sign that we have the first female leader there, even though she brought in fewer women into her new government and some of her previous policies. But I think she's incredibly busy in the first few weeks for her attending these meetings. At the same time, what she needs to do and the impact on our industry, that trickles down so far later. People are going to invest in Japan now, for sure. That people still want more hotels and more brands. And again, the difference on the impact you can make on an asset in Japan is still fantastic, right? The foreign capital and the way the weekend is still, we call it temporary, but that temporary is quite long.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a great catalyst in coming in with foreign capital to Japan still, regardless of the construction cost and voices of over tourism, etc. It's still a very attractive market.
For sure. And there, as in a lot of Asia Pacific countries this week, it's going to be talk about Trump administration visits and trade talks and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, all that fun stuff that we don't have to care about too much. So it's also true that
go ahead.
What changes there is that we have this shift in productivity around the entire region, right? Enforced, but still good. And that's so evident in Japan, where you're shifting something where you had X amount of employees and you removed a lot of that for efficiencies. That's one of the biggest shifts that is needed for them to be able to run it. Maybe the one takeaway that we had at HICAP as well, that if there's some kind of silver lining moving forward, is, we've said now for a while, the new supply peak, if you will, at a macro level is 27, right? So we're still 26, growing, but it's not going to be peak year with all that under construction of new hotels. So we have a little bit of a breather, but in 27, our forecast is that that's also, and I'm not saying super high numbers, but occupancy in ADR will still grow a little bit higher in 27, despite new supply coming in. I think that's a testament to the industry and the interest and the fact that demand will continue to grow. And it's about having, we do like the foreigners coming in overseas, but if ASEAN travel, for instance, intra-ASEAN can continue to grow, ASEAN just grows this week with its 11th member in Timor-Leste after years of lobbying, is now an official member of ASEAN. So if that travel kind of continues, then I think that's an opportunity with the cheaper flights, right?
So any other markets jump out at you as interesting this month, or do we cover all of our bases?
Well, I think nothing has changed in that people want to continue to get their brands in India. The regional growth opportunities continues to be immense. So India and Australia, the story is very stable and good growth. And though even we used to say that about Australia, the fact that we keep saying that about India is interesting, I think. So Australia keeps doing really well, and obviously Brisbane is one of the other things that we can deep dive more on next week as well, the next month, because that's a market and a couple of other markets that are starting to change what it looks like as well.
Absolutely. So we've reached near the end of our podcast, which is always sports talk time. I will say candidly, sports are on my mind because as we sit down to record this, it's Monday morning Jesper time. It is Sunday night Sean time. So I've wrapped up the day of NFL football. Glad to see my Buffalo Bills with a 31-point win over the Carolina Panthers. But that's not the football we talk about on this podcast. So you mentioned our Sydney Swans women's team is looking like they still have some hope.
Yeah, we're at the business end of the season for the AFLW, and next weekend, if listeners are into this kind of thing, pay attention. It's decided to get into the finals. Swans are just below the line, but it's a fraction, like it's just minor points to get in there, and then
we've still got hope.
It's a proper hornet's nest on games. Any two teams can be in the finals there, and as a reverse for your colleague there, obviously the Kangaroos are on top of the ladder.
So yeah, I've mentioned that to Trevor, that his much maligned Kangaroos are a completely different story in the AFLW. Undefeated to this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I watched. I made a prediction on the HICAP stage because I was asked by Jeff Higley who's going to win the World Cup in North America next year in 26 in football. And since my Swedish team are absolute rubbish and maybe most likely not even going to qualify when everyone else is in there, I think I had to say something controversial. So I said, if Sweden don't qualify, then Norway will win it. And the odds are good. So if anyone is a betting man, I think, that's something for.
I thought you had to pick an Asian team just for solidarity's sake while you're at HICAP. Well, although I feel like the world would be a better place if the Japanese team would like go on some crazy run, because they're always the most like entertaining brand of soccer at the World Cup every single time.
Yes, I suppose if you're generous, you call it free flowing. But also means you're pretty open at the back. But yeah.
Yes, it's offensively minded. And honestly, their fans are very civically minded, very tidy and clean and conscientious, which is a rarity for football fans of any site.
Very true. Which reminds me, we need to talk about next month. Let's talk a little bit about the World Cup and the hotels and the cities there, and how that has the difference from Asia Pacific and into that. I think there's
we can. I mean, we've been talking about the World Cup over here for quite some time. Anyway, last thing we need to say about footy before we close that. I was so tempted to have the Charlie Curnow emergency podcast just to talk about the hype so is real.
That's good. We finally, Sydney Swans have signed a really good player. We have someone who can kick goals. There is a chance that we will kick a couple of more goals than last year.
And not only do we have somebody, we got like the guy. So yeah, the hype is real.
Before we get all negative and say like, what if he gets injured? This is a phenomenal player, no doubt. We're really excited about it.
The one thing that always depresses me about talking about any sports at this point in my life, though, is that half of the discussion was like, oh, Carlton, the team that got him, like traded him, like they'd made the right move because he's too old. Like by the time his contract runs out, he's going to be so washed. He's 28. Like, I don't want to hear about being too old for anything.
This is true. It is a rough game. It's a young man's game, footy. This is absolutely true. But I think that's a bit of a stretch. You have to say he's over the hill when you're 28. He will prove everyone wrong there who says that.
I'm knocking on wood on this fake wooden desk that I'm sitting at.
And for our next one, we will have the the results out on what I believe now is the tied World Series in baseball as well. So,
well, we've got all right. I have. There's a lot of strong feelings about this year's World Series, though. But we've got a very Japanese represented team with the Dodgers this year. So
that's what I was kind of thinking, right? If you look at what he did in the past couple of weeks, I totally get that he's one of the best ball players ever, and arguably the best combined player. To just see what he did there with, 3 homers and 10 strikeouts.
Obviously, you refer to Shohei Ohtani. Yes, unbelievable. Although I'll say the fun team to root for is clearly the Blue Jays. And that's only because the Mariners are no longer an option, which is another team with Japanese ties.
This is true.
Long time Japanese owned by Nintendo of all companies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think a lot of people were rooting for Seattle there, but I think, and now the neutrals, listen, as a Rockies fan, I can never say anything good about Dodgers. I just appreciate Ohtani's play, and that's about it. I agree.
Well, you're a Rockies fan. I'm a White Sox fan. We have nothing to enjoy about baseball other than
we're at the bottom
teams.
for sure. Yeah, we'll see. Any Marlins fans out there?
On that note, I'll see you again next month. Yes,
will do. Thanks, John. Cheers.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on October 26, 2025, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. You can find all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen. Visit CoStar.com/hotel news for more.